Hello my young viewers and families, and welcome back to Crime Whispers. I know many of you listen to these stories as you fall asleep, so go ahead and get cozy. Grab your blanket and settle in. But first, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us keep going. Also, let me know in the comments where are you watching from, and what time is it for you right now. Now let's begin tonight's first case. Case 1. The Russian cannibal couple, Dmitry Bakshiv and Natalia Bakshiva-Dmitry Bakshiv, 35, and Natalia Baksheva, 42. To the outside world, they were just a quiet couple living in southern Russia, but behind closed doors, they were luring people through dating apps, then killing them, eating them, and preserving their flesh like frozen leftovers. They claimed they learned how to kill from YouTube videos, and over a span of more than 2 decades, they may have murdered and consumed up to 30 people. Their arrest. It only happened by complete accident when they lost their phone. September 11th, 2017, Krai region, RUSSCI. That day, a construction worker was walking home from his shift when he noticed a smartphone on the ground. It looked almost new, and surprisingly, it wasn't locked. Like anyone might, he opened it, hoping to find contact details for the owner. But what he found inside nearly made him drop the phone in terror. There were photos. Horrifying photos. One showed a man taking a selfie with a human hand in his mouth, even shoving the fingers into his nose and smiling. Another showed him holding a severed woman's head like a trophy, smiling proudly. And then, out of nowhere, that same man in the photos appeared right in front of him. He asked, "Have you seen my phone?" The worker froze. Trembling, he lied, saying, "No," then slowly walked away, heart pounding. The moment he was far enough, he ran to the nearest police station. The unsettling. When police examined the phone, they were stunned. The images were grotesque beyond words, clear evidence of cannibalism and murder. With data from the phone, authorities quickly identified the owner, Dmitry Bakshiv. He lived in a dormitory at a local military aviation school, alongside his wife Natalia, who worked there as a nurse. When police raided the couple's residence, the scene was more horrifying than they ever imagined. There were photos hanging on the walls, dozens of victims, freezers filled with human remains, 19 pieces of skin, jars of flesh preserved in saline, a human scalp mistaken for a wig, and one photo on the bed showed a severed head served on a plate, decorated with oranges and olives. It was like walking into a horror movie. The CIO, and despite all the evidence, Dmitry initially claimed innocence. He told investigators he found the bodies in the woods and simply took pictures as souvenirs. Natalia claimed mental illness, suggesting they were both in a daze during the killings. But psychiatric evaluations proved otherwise. Both were fully sane, fully aware, and fully responsible. Eventually, confronted with undeniable proof, the couple broke. Natalia even pointed out victims by name, nearly 30 people, many of whom had been missing in Russia since 1999. The couple admitted they began with an obsession for gore content on the internet. Eventually, it wasn't enough to watch. They needed to experience it. The method they targeted lonely individuals on dating platforms, often single men or women. After inviting them over, they used ether, or a Russian sedative called korvalol, to knock them unconscious. Then they'd kill them, dismember them, and eat their flesh. What's even more disturbing, Natalia shared some of the meat with her co-workers. She'd cooked and distributed it at the Aviation Academy cafeteria, possibly feeding human flesh to cadet pilots, without them ever knowing. Their final victim was a young waitress who met them for drinks. But when Natalia became jealous of Dmitry's attention toward her, she left the room. Dmitry then bludgeoned the girl with a metal rod. They dismembered her body, photographed the process, and that's when they lost the phone that would expose everything. Dmitry CHLDHOO'd. Looking back at their pasts, the signs were there. Dmitri was born in southern Russia's Krasnodar region. As a baby, his biological mother gave him up to an orphanage. He spent his early years there, quiet and withdrawn, until he was adopted by a couple named Svetlana and Vladimir. For a time, he was a well-behaved, quiet boy, but when he was 15, tragedy hit again. His adoptive mother died of cancer. His adoptive father, consumed by grief and rage, became violent and eventually kicked Dmitri out. He was completely unprepared for life, no money, no direction, and no one to help. And that's where we'll leave this case for now. If this story shocked you or kept you curious, let me know your thoughts in the comments. Where do you think it all began? The violence, the obsession, the cannibalism. Was it born in childhood or built through years of darkness? Thank you for joining me here tonight. Take a deep breath, let your thoughts go, and drift into rest. Dmitri never finished school. He had no job, no car, no real direction. At first, he wandered between neighbors' homes, hoping someone might take him in, but no one did. Within a year, he was homeless, desperate, and angry. Dmitri robbed a small local shop, then stole a car in a failed escape attempt. He didn't make it far. He was arrested and sentenced to just under 2 years in prison. During his sentence, no one visited him, not once. Inside or outside those prison walls, Dmitri was truly alone. After his release, he tried to rebuild. He took a job in construction and rented a modest room. He didn't drink much, but he spent his evenings in bars, often with heavy drug users. Still, no matter how hard he tried, Dmitri couldn't form connections. He had never even had a girlfriend. That is until he met Natalia. Natalia's story. Natalia was 7 years older than Dmitri, raised by her mother and grandmother in southern Russia. She also endured tragedy early on, losing her mother at a young age. At 19, Natalia enrolled in medical school and became a nurse. She was quickly promoted to head nurse in the sanitation department of Later, she transferred to the military aviation school, the same one where she would eventually meet Dmitri. Before that, Natalia had married a military officer and had a son by the age of 23. But then tragedy struck. Again, her husband died when their son was still a child. Overcome with grief, Natalia turned to alcohol. Eventually, she couldn't hold a steady job. She checked herself into a psychiatric facility, claiming to have a manic disorder, but doctors found no signs of mental illness and released her. Jobless, directionless, still grieving, Natalia spent her days drinking in bars. And that's where she met Dmitri. Their connection was instant. Within months, she invited him to move in with her and her son. For Dmitri, it was the first time he felt wanted. It was his first real home. The spiral begins. 5 years later, they got married, but Natalia's drinking worsened. Her son, embarrassed by his mother's unstable behavior, eventually left home. Heartbroken, Natalia decided to leave the city entirely and start over with Dmitri by her side. No one could have imagined what they were about to become. The neighbors horror when the news finally broke. The public was horrified, but the people most shaken were their neighbors. Some had noticed the strange smell coming from the couple's apartment, but assumed it was poor hygiene or bad food. Many described Dmitri as polite, often apologizing if they caused any inconvenience, but his body odor was overwhelming. One neighbor even described it as unbearable. No one could have guessed the truth. No one imagined they were living beside cannibals. Aftermath and Cientians, whether Dmitri's actions were born from trauma or something darker within. One thing is certain, he would pay for what he had done. Russia does not have the death penalty. Instead, in 2019, Natalia was sentenced to 10 years of hard labor in a penal colony. There, prisoners live in brutal conditions. No privacy, harsh physical labor, no pay, no basic comforts, and constant surveillance. But the public was outraged when Natalia was convicted only of inciting murder, not first-degree homicide. As a result, she was released after serving just a year and a half. Meanwhile, Dmitri received a harsher sentence, 12 years in a maximum security prison. There he endured severe isolation and underwent psychological treatment. But on February 16, 2020, Dmitri died from complications related to diabetes. The only thing he left behind, a pencil drawing of actress Audrey Hepburn. Why? No one knows. The rumors and THOR is soon after the case closed. The horrific images from Dmitri's phone were leaked online, causing a global media storm. Speculation exploded. Some claimed Natalia had secretly sold canned human meat as exotic products. Others feared Dmitri had distributed human flesh to restaurants around Krasnodar. The police launched a thorough investigation and ultimately debunked the rumors. But doubts still lingered. Could two people really murder and consume 30 victims over nearly 20 years without help? Some even suspected the pair belonged to a secret cannibal cult operating in southern Russia. If that were true, why didn't they expose others for a reduced sentence? We may never know. What we do know is that their crimes were more horrifying than any fiction. The nightmares their victims must have endured, the pain, the terror, and the grief left behind for their families. It left a stain on the conscience of an entire nation. Transition, calm pause, and now, let's travel far from Russia to the islands of Thailand, where paradise turned to horror. Case 2. The Koh Phangan Party Murder, Thailand, 2023. Koh Phangan, known for its full moon parties and stunning beaches, was once considered a tropical playground. But in August 2023, the island made headlines for something far more chilling. It was 6 a.m. when the peace of morning was shattered by a scream. At a local waste disposal center, a female garbage worker had just stumbled upon a human body inside a trash bag. She immediately ran to her manager in shock. The workers at this dump, mostly Burmese immigrants, often sifted through garbage, looking for valuables. Tourists left behind expensive items after partying: phones, jewelry, designer bags. But that morning, what they first assumed was discarded animal meat turned out to be something else entirely. It was a dismembered human body. The landfill manager quickly contacted the police. Within the hour, a swarm of officers and reporters flooded the site. The remains discovered were horrifying: hips, forearms, legs, intestines, and male genitalia, all left discarded in Koh Phangan's main garbage dump. Forensics determined that the victim had died less than 48 hours earlier. Rigor mortis had set in, and the early stages of decomposition placed the body in the fresh phase, still recognizable, but beginning to break down. The remains belonged to a Caucasian man, leading investigators to believe he was likely a tourist, perhaps in town for the island's infamous full moon beach parties. In a country where tourism fuels the economy, the murder of a foreign visitor was devastating news, and authorities knew they had to solve the case quickly. Their first step: track the origin of the trash. But the manager explained that all garbage from across Koh Phangan was dumped at that single location every morning. It was a dead end, an unexpected break. Despite the setback, investigators waited for forensic analysis and DNA results while reviewing missing persons reports, hoping for a match and then a breakthrough. Later that same day, another plastic bag was found at the same site. Inside it were blood-soaked clothing, a t-shirt, shorts, underwear, and a receipt from a local supermarket, Big CA. But the true turning point came just hours later. A tourist walked into the Koh Phangan police station to report his friend missing. The missing man was Edwin Arita, a 44-year-old Colombian plastic surgeon. The man reporting him, none other than Daniel Sancho Barreloa, 29-year-old YouTube celebrity chef and the son of two famous Spanish actors. Daniel had arrived on the island on July 31, 2023, supposedly for the full moon party. He told police he hadn't seen Edwin since the night of August 3rd. The officers, already deep into an investigation involving a dismembered foreigner, exchanged wary glances. Was this just a coincidence, or were the two cases connected? Daniel's SDATA, MIN2. According to Daniel, Edwin had booked their hotel using his own credit card. Daniel picked him up at the pier on August 2nd. That evening, they went to the beach, but he claimed they got separated. He said Edwin simply disappeared. Daniel said he tried calling and texting Edwin but got no response. He only came to the police because Edwin's sister had asked him to. Officers immediately noticed Daniel had fresh scratches on his arms. They also questioned the timeline if Daniel had last seen Edwin on the evening of August 3rd. How were body parts already found the morning of the 4th? Something didn't add up. CCTV in the supermarket RSEIP people began verifying Daniel's story, and the cracks started showing. Surveillance footage confirmed that Daniel had arrived on July 31st, rented a motorcycle, and checked into a hotel using Edwin's card. Then came the bombshell. The receipt found at the dump was traced to August 1st, the day before Edwin even arrived on the island. Security footage from Big CA showed Daniel buying bleach, cleaning products, garbage bags, and cutting tools items clearly intended for something very specific. Yet Daniel hadn't even met Edwin yet. According to his statement, police didn't confront him immediately. They held on to this crucial detail, waiting for the right moment. Trail of Lease TV then showed Daniel picking Edwin up at the pier on August 2nd. But instead of taking him to the hotel, he drove him 28 kilometers away to a different location, Hat Salad Resort. That was the last time Edwin was seen alive. The clothing Edwin wore while riding behind Daniel on the motorbike. It matched the clothing found in the trash dump the next day. More and more, the evidence pointed toward Daniel. Edwin Arita, the VCTIM1, was a well-respected Colombian surgeon. He loved horseback riding, traveling, and sports. He often visited cities like Buenos Aires and London, and had recently shown interest in moving to Spain. He was deeply devoted to his parents and his sister, Darlene Arita, whom he supported financially and emotionally. It was Darlene who first raised the alarm. When her brother didn't respond to messages on August 2nd, she became worried. She contacted his friends and learned he was with Daniel Sancho. Eventually, she tracked down Daniel's Instagram and began messaging him directly around August 4th. Instagram messages from Dar Ali and Darlene's messages were filled with panic. She pleaded with Daniel for answers. He claimed he had lost Edwin at the beach. He said they took mushrooms and got disoriented. Edwin, he claimed, thought something was wrong with him and left. Darlene didn't buy it. She begged him to report Edwin missing. Daniel agreed, offering his WhatsApp number and telling her he'd take a shower before heading to the police station. That same day, he walked in to file the missing persons report. The ARR East but investigators had seen enough. Daniel's story didn't match the surveillance footage. The receipt from the dump matched his Big EA purchases from August 1st, and the clothing found was clearly Edwin's. Combined with his injuries and inconsistent account, police arrested Daniel following his interview. There is speculation that Darlene's persistence may have pushed Daniel to report the incident, possibly thinking it would shield him from suspicion. The Villa CRCH on August 5th. Police and forensic experts searched the Hat Salad Resort villa where Daniel had stayed. What they found confirmed their worst fears. The villa had been scrubbed down with bleach, but traces remained: blood in the plumbing hair and tissue in the drains, water samples, grease residue, and DNA throughout the bathroom. They also found $80,000 in cash and a gold chain. Daniel insisted he was innocent, furious that police were wasting time instead of finding Edwin. But on August 6th, the DNA results came in. The remains from the dump site were confirmed to be Edwin's, and so were the biological traces inside Daniel's villa. The Sion FSION with the evidence presented to him. Daniel finally confessed. He admitted to killing Edwin but claimed it was an accident. He said Edwin had become possessive, and he brought him to the villa to break things off. He claimed Edwin refused to accept it, and during a struggle, Daniel lashed out. Daniel believed that meeting Edwin face to face would clear the air, and that Edwin would finally understand. But when they were alone, Edwin had no interest in talking. He initiated sexual advances instead. Feeling threatened and fearing an assault, Daniel pushed him away. This angered Edwin, who had spent considerable money to join Daniel on this trip. What started as a shove escalated into a full-blown physical fight. Edwin left scratches on Daniel's arms, and in the chaos, Daniel struck Edwin in the face. Edwin collapsed and lost consciousness. In a state of panic, Daniel dragged him to the bathroom and splashed water on his face, trying to wake him, but Edwin remained unresponsive. Frozen in shock for nearly an hour, Daniel eventually made a horrific decision. He would dismember Edwin's body. Over the next 3 hours, he cut Edwin into approximately 14 parts. He separated the pelvis, genitals, legs, and intestines from the rest of the body. That night, Daniel attempted to rent a kayak to dispose of the remains, but the vendor refused due to the late hour. Determined, Daniel purchased a kayak outright for $11,000 between 10 p.m. and the early hours of August 3rd. Daniel made multiple trips into the sea under the cover of darkness, dumping Edwin's body parts. At 2 a.m., he discarded the head. Later, at 6 a.m., he returned to dispose of more. Coincidentally, while Daniel was kayaking, sanitation workers discovered some of the remains he had discarded earlier that night. That same day, Daniel attended the full moon beach party, seemingly unfazed. At 11 p.m., he made his final trip to discard the rest of Edwin's remains. Although Daniel's confession about how he disposed of the body was believable, detectives doubted his version of what happened in the villa. His detailed account of dismemberment and disposal may have been an attempt to appear honest and make the rest of his story seem credible. But the investigators weren't buying it. Unbeknownst to Daniel, the authorities had already gathered CCTV footage showing him purchasing the tools and cleaning supplies used in the dismemberment well before the alleged accident occurred. The fact that he booked a second villa, far from the one he disclosed to police, and took Edwin there immediately upon arrival, painted a different story. He dismembered and disposed of Edwin's body within hours, using pre-bought tools. It was premeditated. The evidence now strongly pointed to the entire trip being planned with one goal: to lure and murder Edwin. The motive remains a mystery, but Daniel had no intention of letting Edwin leave that villa alive. According to the police's version of events, Daniel lured Edwin to Kofangan under the guise of a romantic getaway. After picking Edwin up, he diverted him to a different villa than the one he told police he had rented. Exhausted from travel, Edwin was likely caught off guard when Daniel struck him with a blunt object. But Edwin fought back bravely, inflicting wounds on Daniel in the struggle. Eventually, Edwin either died from the blow or lost consciousness. Daniel dragged his body into the bathroom chosen for its tiled surfaces, ideal for containing blood, and carried out the dismemberment with the tools he had purchased the day before. He tried to clean the scene thoroughly, packing the remains into garbage bags. Initially, Daniel planned to dump all the remains at sea, but he miscalculated how difficult it would be to transport and cut through the larger body parts. Improvising, he dumped several bags including the torso at a local waste disposal site, assuming no one would sift through piles of garbage. But Thai waste collectors routinely sort through the refuse, and Edwin's remains were discovered. Just hours later, Daniel's sea disposal trips were carefully timed late at night or early morning to avoid detection. He stayed the night at the villa where no dismemberment occurred to maintain his alibi. After checking out of the original villa on the morning of August 3rd, he went to the full moon party to celebrate what he believed was a clean getaway. That night, he dumped the final body parts. Like many killers who think they've outsmarted authorities, Daniel underestimated modern investigation techniques. CCTV proved critical. It showed Daniel's purchases in advance of the murder and his transport of Edwin on a motorbike, wearing the same clothes Edwin was last seen in. The timeline didn't match his story. Investigators knew they were dealing with a calculated, cold-blooded killer. But one question lingered: why would Daniel report Edwin missing instead of fleeing? The answer lay in Edwin's bond with his sister, Darling Arellano. They messaged daily. When Edwin stopped responding on August 2nd, she knew something was wrong. She contacted his friends and discovered Daniel, the Spanish chef, was also in Thailand. She messaged him directly through Instagram and asked a simple question: "What do you know about my brother?" His response was chilling: "I lost track of him on the beach." Her alarm bells went off. How could a friend not know where he was? She thought. She pleaded with Daniel to report Edwin missing and, at the same time, contacted the Colombian consulate in Thailand, warning them not to let him leave the country. It was her persistence that pushed Daniel to go to the police. The consulate's alert also prompted Thai authorities to keep Daniel under close watch. Then came the call Darling dreaded. The consulate phoned her with devastating news. Remains had been found. "Is it my brother?" she asked. The silence on the line confirmed her worst fear. At that moment, she later said in an emotional interview, "I knew it was him." Darling's tenacity and quick thinking were instrumental in ensuring Daniel didn't escape. Her actions gave police time to gather critical evidence. On August 6th, DNA tests confirmed that the body parts and blood in Daniel's villa were Edwin's. But why did Daniel kill Edwin? Their story began a year earlier on Instagram. Flirtatious messages evolved into sexual encounters, dates, and plans for a future together. Edwin even invested €10,000 in a joint restaurant venture and allowed Daniel to use his credit card. Yet their relationship was complicated. Daniel had a long-term girlfriend, Laura, and the two were planning weddings in Spain and Thailand. Despite the intimacy with Edwin, Daniel didn't identify as gay and wanted to end the relationship. For Edwin, this was not just a fling, it was emotional, physical, and financial. He had invested his heart and resources. Daniel, on the other hand, may have seen Edwin as an obstacle, and for reasons known only to him. Daniel chose murder over simply walking away. Daniel's newfound relationship with his much younger sugar baby turned toxic. According to Daniel, Edwin simply wouldn't let go. He claimed Edwin threatened to release intimate photos and videos of the two of them, a move that would destroy both his reputation and that of his prominent family. But it's important to note there was no solid evidence that Edwin ever made such a threat. If those private materials were leaked, Edwin would also have a lot to lose. As a respected plastic surgeon, his professional and personal life would be equally at risk. Then came a shocking revelation. In an interview, one of Edwin's close friends disclosed that Edwin had loaned Daniel a staggering 900 million pesos, roughly €216,000, to launch a restaurant in Spain. This wasn't just a casual investment. It was meant to be a joint venture, with both men sharing equal stakes and equal profits. In fact, just weeks before the crime, Daniel's own father publicly praised him for running not one but 2 restaurants in Spain. Now we know at least part of the truth behind that success. The most plausible motive behind Edwin's murder appears to be greed. Daniel saw a way to cut Edwin out of the business, take the profits, and silence a secret that, if exposed, could irreparably harm his public image. But Daniel's behavior in the aftermath spoke volumes. The day after killing Edwin and before making a final kayaking trip to dump his remains, Daniel partied on the beach at a full moon gathering on August 3rd. Who celebrates like that if they've just lost a friend in a tragic accident? Then, on August 6, 2023, flanked by law enforcement, Daniel was taken to various sites around Kofe Angan Island to reconstruct the murder of his 44-year-old Colombian lover, Dr. Edwin Arrieta Ortega. The following day, the judge ordered Daniel's provisional detention while prosecutors pursued the death penalty. However, precedent in Thailand suggests that even if he is sentenced to death, it may be commuted to life, similar to another case in 2020 involving a Spanish national. This raises a question: should foreign nationals be allowed to commit heinous crimes abroad, only to be spared the full extent of local justice? In April 2024, Daniel Sancho was officially charged with premeditated murder, concealment of a body, and destruction of documents. He pled not guilty to the murder and document destruction, but admitted to hiding the body. Edwin's family does not seek the death penalty, but they firmly believe Daniel should receive a sentence that matches the severity of his crime. His trial is ongoing, and the final verdict is yet to come. Case 3. The Temple Massacre. A warm August night in Arizona, an unfathomable tragedy unfolded at Wat Phra Kunaram Buddhist Temple. There, 7 monks, a nun, and a 16-year-old temple worker were slaughtered execution style. Their bodies were discovered arranged in a chilling circle on the living room floor of their residential quarters, each one fatally shot in the back of the head. It was one of the most barbaric mass killings in the state's history. The scene was so disturbing that local police immediately deployed 66 officers, aided by the FBI and criminal psychologists, to investigate. Shockingly, within days, a group of young men came forward and confessed to the crime, but the evidence told a different story. Police quickly determined that the confessions were false. So why would anyone admit to such a brutal act they didn't commit? And who really carried out the massacre? Wat Phra Kunaram, a peaceful temple in the suburbs of Phoenix, was one of the few Buddhist sanctuaries in the region, but the morning of August 10th shattered that peace. A local resident, who regularly delivered food, arrived to an eerie silence. When he investigated further, what he saw paralyzed him in horror. 9 lifeless bodies, clad in saffron robes, arranged in a circular formation like the spokes of a wheel, their hands bound behind their backs. Each had suffered multiple gunshot wounds, some up to 3 times. One monk appeared to have tried to move, suggesting a last-minute attempt to escape. Others showed signs of having been shot while in prayer. Cigarette ashes filled an ashtray in the center of the circle. Fire extinguishers had been discharged across the room, likely as an act of desecration. The word blood was carved deep into a wall, possibly referencing a known Arizona gang, yet nothing appeared to have been stolen. Valuable items, cash, and even a donation tree remained untouched. Investigators found shell casings from both a 20-gauge shotgun and a .22 caliber firearm, indicating multiple shooters. Distinct military-style boot prints were discovered, prints not belonging to any of the temple's residents, who never wore shoes indoors. Forensic analysis retrieved over 1,000 fingerprints, all linked to monks and temple volunteers. All 9 victims were Thai nationals. Most were middle-aged monks, along with a 75-year-old nun and her young relative who worked at the temple. Despite rumors of a love affair involving one monk, no evidence of such was ever found. The victims led humble, spiritual lives with no known enemies, involvement in drugs, or criminal activity. So who would commit such a merciless, ritualistic killing? And why? What happened at Wat Phra Kunaram remains one of Arizona's darkest and most confounding murder mysteries. The brutal killings at Wat Phra Kunaram temple sent shockwaves, not just through the local Thai community in Arizona, but across 2 nations. In response, the Thai ambassador to the United States traveled to Phoenix to assess the situation firsthand. The Thai government urged American authorities to spare no effort in finding the perpetrators. As social and political pressure mounted, the FBI stepped in to assist with the investigation at the crime scene. An FBI psychological profiler noted 3 key characteristics: disorganization, youthfulness, and recklessness traits evident in the chaotic state of the temple and the careless evidence left behind. Investigators began focusing on teenagers in the area, especially those who might have been familiar with the temple or had any past connection to it. Forensic analysts examined the shell casings found at the scene and identified them as belonging 2.22 caliber semi-automatic rifles made by the Marlin Firearms Corporation, a line of rifles that had only entered production 3 years prior. This meant the weapons were relatively new. Investigators scoured pawn shops and firearms dealers, seizing hundreds of rifles and conducting test firings, but none matched the bullets retrieved from the crime scene. As weeks passed and leads dried up, a surprising tip came in from an unexpected source. 1 month after the massacre, police received a phone call from a man at the Tucson Psychiatric Institute. He identified himself and claimed he could name the individuals responsible for the killings, then abruptly hung up. The caller was Mike McGrath, a psychiatric patient at a hospital nearly 190 kilometers from the temple. At first, police were skeptical of Mike's claims due to his mental health history. Still, they called him backhand. What he revealed shocked investigators. Mike claimed he had served as a lookout while the others entered the temple to commit what he said was meant to be a robbery, not a massacre. He described hearing a barrage of gunfire from inside and then fleeing with the group. But what truly caught the investigators' attention was Mike's mention of a specific detail: that the word blood had been scrawled on the temple wall. This detail had never been released to the public. In fact, authorities had secretly removed the wall to prevent it from leaking to the media. That knowledge strongly suggested Mike had direct or second-hand involvement, based on his account. Investigators identified 4 other individuals: Mark Nunez, Victor Zarate, Dante Parker, and Leo Brusal, residents of Tucson. Of the group, only Dante Parker had a criminal record for robbery. With this information, a task force was dispatched from Phoenix to Tucson to apprehend the suspects. Mike McGraw accompanied them to help identify the men. All 4 were taken into custody swiftly. However, each one denied any involvement in the temple attack. Despite their denials, authorities were confident they had the right men. On September 13th, a major press conference was held. The Serious Crimes Task Force, consisting of 66 investigators, declared the case solved and announced the arrests of 5 Tucson men, 2 of whom had prior convictions. The media dubbed them the Tucson suspects. At the time, both the public and police believed justice was close, but no one knew the investigation had only scratched the surface as days passed with no confessions. Investigators shifted tactics. During a second round of interrogations, they began telling the suspects that the only way to avoid the death penalty was to confess. Exhaustive questioning followed, lasting hours on end and depriving the men of sleep. Eventually, one of the most defiant suspects, Dante Parker, broke down and confessed. One by one, the others followed, each providing their own version of events. The confessions agreed on the general timeline. On the afternoon of August 9th, the group had traveled from Tucson to Phoenix in 2 vehicles, a Ford Bronco and a Chevrolet Blazer. They allegedly prepared their weapons in South Phoenix, then headed to the temple that evening. Parker added chilling details, including the theft of a spiral-shaped ring from one of the monks and how a nun unexpectedly walked in on them. Yet, troubling inconsistencies plagued the confessions. Parker, for example, claimed the 75-year-old nun was the first victim and said her body lay on its back. In truth, she was found face down. He also stated the word blood had been written, using one of the victim's blood, but that too was false. Moreover, he claimed that monks chased after them as they fled. In reality, no one survived to give chase. McGrath, meanwhile, told police the killers had tossed their bloody clothing on the roadside while fleeing. A thorough search of Tucson turned up nothing. Leo Bruce admitted using his personal firearm during the attack, but ballistic testing proved that his weapon was not the one used in the murders. Investigators shifted focus to footprints left at the scene. Every pair of shoes owned by the suspects was examined. None matched the prints found at the temple. Still, the suspects had detailed knowledge that had never been made public, making it hard to dismiss their confessions outright. Yet contradictions between their accounts and the physical evidence were impossible to ignore. The lead prosecutor spent a full week reviewing the statements. He concluded the confessions not only contradicted one another, but also lacked basic consistency. Why would 5 men falsely confess to a brutal crime? That question became even more pressing when, on September 17th, Victor Zarate was released. Surveillance footage placed him elsewhere during the murders. The other 4 remained behind bars. Then, over a month later, a break in the case came from an unlikely source. On October 24th, a routine traffic stop near Luke Air Force Base in Phoenix led military police to a .22 caliber rifle sitting in plain view on the passenger seat of a car driven by a 17-year-old. The Office of Special Investigations at the base seized the weapon. Ballistics testing confirmed it matched the bullets used in the Temple massacre. The teen driver, Rolando Cassia, denied knowing the Tucson suspects and claimed he had no role in the murders. He said he had loaned the rifle months earlier to 2 teenage friends, Garcia and Jonathan Duty. This revelation changed everything. Investigators learned that Jonathan Duty's father was stationed at Luke Air Force Base. When his father was transferred, Jonathan had stayed behind in Arizona to complete high school, living with Alex Garcia, his classmate. Jonathan, notably, had ties to Wat Promkunarm. His mother was of Thai origin, and he was familiar with the monks at the temple. Jonathan Duty had once volunteered at the local temple, and his brother had even worked there. That prior connection raised red flags for investigators, who soon obtained a search warrant for the apartment Jonathan shared with his friend Alex Garcia. Both teenagers were students at Agia High School and active participants in the Air Force ROTC military training program. During their search, investigators uncovered a Stevens 20-gauge shotgun, the same model used in the Temple massacre. Ballistics quickly confirmed it was a match to the shell casings recovered at the crime scene. Alongside the shotgun, police seized 2 knives, a camouflage hat, 2 masks, and gloves. 2 pairs of shoes belonging to the boys were also taken in for analysis, and the prints matched impressions found at the temple at Alex Garcia's parents' house. Investigators found several duffel bags containing military equipment gear not issued by the high school ROTC program. These were items the boys had clearly purchased on their own. It became increasingly evident that both Jonathan and Alex were heavily influenced by military fantasies. Perhaps they imagined themselves as brave soldiers playing out a twisted war game, seeing the world as a hostile place that demanded aggression. With mounting evidence, police arrested both boys, but the arrests caused divisions within the investigative team. Some officers remained convinced that the 2 teens were connected to the original suspects from Tucson. Others believed the Tucson men were innocent. A faction of the department insisted on continuing to detain the 4 men from Tucson, pointing to their confessions as credible proof. They argued there was no logical reason for anyone to admit to such a heinous crime without being involved. However, County Attorney Rick Romley reviewed the facts and concluded there was insufficient evidence to continue holding the Tucson suspects. On November 22nd, all 4 men were released, and the charges against them were officially dropped. The investigation now focused solely on Jonathan Duty and Alex Garcia. Initially, both teens denied involvement and tried to throw investigators off track by inventing fictitious names. Jonathan claimed he and Alex were part of a mysterious underground gang that met near the Agua Fria River on Camelback Road. He said the group had gone to the temple that night to stage a robbery. Jonathan alleged that someone inside the temple recognized a member of the gang, prompting him to flee, and that while he was outside, someone else started shooting. He claimed the crime had originally been a challenge to see if they could bypass the temple's security alarms. But Jonathan couldn't explain why they brought along guns, knives, and military gear. He went on to say that the fictional gang had threatened to harm his family if he told the truth. Investigators, of course, didn't buy the story. They saw it for what it was, a desperate attempt to deflect blame. After several hours of interrogation, Jonathan finally broke down and gave a true confession. He admitted that he and Alex had planned the temple break-in to steal money and prove their abilities as future soldiers. Alex Garcia, too, eventually confessed. He recounted the night of August 9, 1991, in chilling detail. According to Alex, the plan began as a robbery, one they'd obsessed over for 2 months after hearing Jonathan's brother mention the temple held a solid gold Buddha statue and a safe with $2,000 inside. Jonathan had also set his sights on a $1,000 car parked on temple grounds, convinced it would be his prize after the heist, turning the robbery into a game of war. The duo bought military-style clothing and gear, snow boots, camouflage hats, scarves, goggles, and knife belts. Jonathan borrowed a rifle from a friend named Katakia, while Alex secretly took his uncle's shotgun. The pair tested the weapons in the White Tank Mountains, attempting to use a silencer, but when it failed, they skipped further practice and pushed forward with the plan. That night, after attending a party, the two headed to the temple around 10 p.m. They scoped the grounds, then stormed into the living room and ordered the monks to lie on the floor. They forced the victims to kneel in a circle, facing each other. Jonathan held them at gunpoint for nearly an hour, while Alex searched for the safe's keys and vandalized the temple. The monks didn't resist. Soon after, a nun entered and was also taken hostage. The boys managed to steal over $2,500, along with audio and video equipment, but failed to find the key to the safe. Alex reportedly wanted to leave at that point, but Jonathan insisted they eliminate all witnesses. Standing on a chair, Jonathan opened fire. Alex claimed he only wounded some victims with the shotgun and insisted he didn't kill anyone. After the massacre, the pair scrawled the word "Bloods" on a hallway wall in a bid to mislead investigators into thinking a gang was involved, then fled the scene. Fearing the death penalty, Alex Garcia agreed to cooperate. He pled guilty early and testified against Jonathan Duty. He also confessed to another shocking crime. Just weeks after the temple massacre, he and his girlfriend, Michelle Hoover, murdered an elderly woman named Alice Cameron while she was camping near Horseshoe Lake, stealing just $20 from her. In 1994, both Jonathan and Alex were tried for the temple killings. Since they were only 17 at the time of the murders, Arizona law barred prosecutors from seeking the death penalty. Jonathan Duty was convicted of 9 counts of first-degree murder, armed robbery, and burglary. He received a sentence of 281 years. Alex Garcia was convicted of 10 counts of first-degree murder, armed robbery, and burglary, and was sentenced to 271 years. Michelle Hoover received 15 years for her role in the murder of Alice Cameron. But a haunting question remained. Why did 4 of the 5 men from Tucson falsely confess? The answer likely lies in the intense pressure they endured. Interrogations lasted dozens of hours. The men were held under extreme stress and likely confessed just to make it stop. Their stories were inconsistent, but in their eagerness to close the case, police overlooked the discrepancies. Why did Mike McGrath, the mentally ill man, claim to be the lookout? Mike suffered from psychological issues and may have imagined his involvement. In his call to police, he reportedly asked, "Was there blood on the wall?" A question investigators misinterpreted as evidence of insider knowledge, reinforcing their suspicions. Later interviews revealed that Mike endured 44 hours of non-stop interrogation by up to 30 investigators. He claimed he never made the call to police, that someone else at the psychiatric center where he was staying had done it. He said he was denied food, rest, and legal counsel, and was coerced into giving the confession authorities wanted. Another suspect, Parker, who was the first to confess, revealed that before interrogation, the men were placed in a room filled with photos and charts related to the murders. This priming allowed them to echo back details during questioning, creating the illusion of insider knowledge. Desperate to escape the harsh conditions, they parroted what they had seen. Ultimately, the Tucson youth sued the police for coercion, wrongful arrest, and interrogation abuse. Authorities settled the lawsuits for $2.8 million. Mike McGrath received $1.1 million in damages. This case became a stark reminder of the dangers of flawed interrogation tactics, highlighting how innocent people can be manipulated into confessing to crimes they didn't commit. The investigative team swiftly responded to the scene. Guided by detailed witness accounts, they searched the area near the fountain and soon discovered a large plastic bag discarded in a secluded corner. Inside was the body of a young woman. Based on initial observations, the victim appeared to be of Asian descent, likely between 20 and 30 years old, and approximately 170 centimeters tall. Forensic experts noted numerous injuries across her body. Knife wounds were concentrated heavily on her chest and abdomen, evidence of a violent and frenzied attack. The woman also had severe head trauma, possibly from being struck with a blunt object like a rock or stick. But the most devastating injury was a deep 4-centimeter cut across her neck, which was determined to be the cause of death. It was clearly neither an accident nor a suicide. This was a brutal murder. Investigators believed the young woman had been killed elsewhere, then dumped at the location. However, her body had been submerged in water for a long period, severely compromising forensic evidence. Fingerprints, traces of the killer's DNA, and any signs of sexual assault had been effectively erased, making the case more complex and mysterious. So, who was this young woman, and why had she become the target of such savagery in a public park? Given the severity of the case, the Sydney police launched a full-scale investigation. Detectives urgently searched missing persons databases, focusing on height, gender, and age. They examined each profile with painstaking attention to detail, looking for distinctive features like scars or tattoos, but came up empty. It wasn't until the next morning that a couple arrived at the New South Wales police station to report their niece missing. Their concern had grown unbearable. She hadn't contacted them since April 20th. Zhang Feng, the victim's aunt, explained that her niece, LMM, was an international student at the University of Technology Sydney, pursuing a bachelor's degree. According to Jiang's husband, MM was not the kind of person to vanish or cut off communication. They feared something terrible had happened. Investigators immediately collected DNA samples from MMM's belongings at her aunt's home. The forensic analysis confirmed ITE. The DNA matched that of the body found in Manning Lake National Park. Zhang Fang later identified the body in person. On April 29th, police publicly confirmed the victim's identity as LMM and classified her death as a homicide. Investigators first focused on MM's inner circle, starting with her boyfriend. According to Zhang Fang, her niece had recently shared photos on social media of a romantic relationship with an Australian man. They'd been dating for about 2 months, and the family found the man suspicious, describing his behavior as odd and untrustworthy. However, police found no direct evidence linking him to the crime. Interviews and alibi checks ruled him out as a suspect. This forced police to broaden their investigation. They began reconstructing MM's final movements. According to witnesses, MM was last seen on April 21st around 3 p.m., chatting cheerfully with a classmate in front of the main building at the university. She was dressed neatly and appeared in good spirits. She mentioned she was heading to a nearby shopping center. Surveillance footage from the center confirmed her presence there. Around 4 p.m., she was seen browsing stores and buying a cup of bubble tea. From there, she headed toward Kent train station, close to her residence. Cameras captured her waiting on the platform for about 10 minutes. After that, she vanished. Her aunt later told police that had called her around 8 p.m. that night, confirming she had returned home. At the time, only Jiang's husband Barrett was home. This detail became crucial. When police reviewed surveillance footage from around the family's residence, they found something alarming. There was no footage showing ever leaving the house again after she returned. Suspicion quickly turned to Barrett, the only person home with her. Further background checks painted a disturbing picture. Barrett, then 23, was married to Jiang Fang, who was nearly 2 decades older. Their marriage, it appeared, was one of convenience. Jiang was seeking Australian citizenship, while Barrett, an unemployed drug user, relied on her financially. Their small 2-bedroom apartment was shared with another family member, and M had moved in recently, crowding the already tense space. To the outside world, the family appeared harmonious, but police began to believe something sinister had been festering beneath the surface. On April 29th, Barrett was arrested for questioning. A breakthrough came from MM's phone data. After she returned home on April 21st, her phone never left the residence. Investigators believed she had been killed in the apartment, and that someone had staged the disposal of her body to mislead them. A search warrant was issued. Inside the apartment, detectives made chilling discoveries. In the bathroom and in M's bedroom, several hidden cameras were found discreetly installed and clearly intended for long-term surveillance. It was clear Barrett had been secretly watching her. Things grew even darker when police examined Barrett's electronics. On his phone and computer, they found disturbing voyeuristic footage. Barrett had been secretly recording during private moments, showering, changing clothes, and moving about her room. But what horrified police the most was a video found on Barrett's phone memory. Barrett was captured on surveillance footage sneaking into Ling Ming Mei's room while she was asleep. The video clearly showed him committing acts of assault against his niece. With this damning evidence, Sydney police formally filed charges against him, and the case proceeded to trial on June 29, 2016. During the proceedings, prosecutors laid out a comprehensive timeline of events supported by a wide range of evidence, including surveillance footage, videos discovered on Barrett's phone, and eyewitness testimony. The presentation left little room for doubt. Under the weight of this overwhelming evidence, Barrett confessed. According to his confession and police investigations, Barrett had long harbored disturbing intentions toward Ling Ming Mei during the time they lived together. He often acted in secret, waiting patiently for the right moment to strike. That opportunity came on April 21st. Barrett returned home to find the house empty. His wife was at work, and her 2 children from a previous relationship had gone back to China. Only he and Ling Ming Mei were present. In the early hours of April 22nd, while she was asleep, Barrett quietly entered her room. He brought a blunt object with him, which he used to knock her unconscious. Afterward, he bound her hands and feet with tape to ensure she couldn't escape. But midway through the assault, Ling Ming Mei regained consciousness. Realizing the danger, she tried to scream and fight back. Barrett, growing increasingly violent, gagged her with a white cloth and taped it tightly in place to silence her. Despite her desperate struggle, Barrett continued his abuse. He used his phone to take 19 photographs of her bound and suffering. Fearing she might survive and expose him, Barrett made the grim decision to kill her. He retrieved a kitchen knife and stabbed her more than 30 times, stopping only when she was near death. This torment went on for over 10 hours. Within the home they all shared, at approximately 3 p.m. on April 22nd, while the assault was still unfolding. One of Ling Ming Mei's cousins unexpectedly stopped by the house. To avoid being discovered, Barrett dragged the victim into the bathroom and locked the door. When questioned by the cousin, he calmly claimed that the bathroom smelled bad and suggested using another one. He remained inside the bathroom for a long time to maintain the illusion that nothing was amiss. Once the cousin left, Barrett resumed his cover-up, wrapping Ling Ming Mei's body in a large plastic bag and hiding it in the trunk of his car. As concern grew over her sudden disappearance, her aunt Zheng Fong expressed growing worry. Barrett, however, remained completely calm. He discouraged her from contacting the police and showed no signs of fear or remorse. In the early morning hours of April 24th, Barrett carried out the final part of his plan. He drove more than 100 kilometers to Lake Manumia National Park, a remote area, and disposed of the body, hoping to erase all evidence of his crime. When confronted by police, Barrett attempted to defend his actions by claiming he had consumed a large amount of crystal meth and was unaware of what he was doing. Investigators, however, rejected this explanation. Not only did Barrett provide a detailed confession, but toxicology and investigation revealed that he had used up his stash of meth weeks before the crime. His excuse was deemed a desperate lie. On December 13, 2017, Barrett was formally charged with 22 serious offenses, including murder, 19 counts of illegally recording private areas without consent, and 2 counts of possessing illicit pornographic content. 2 days later, on December 15, 2017, the court sentenced him to 46 years in prison with no possibility of parole for 34 years and 6 months. The ruling seemed to bring the case to a close until a shocking discovery surfaced 2 years later. In November 2019, a woman in Sydney visited her mother, who was suffering from Alzheimer's. During their conversation, the mother handed her a USB drive of unknown origin. Out of curiosity, the woman plugged it into her computer and what she found left her horrified. The USB contained 9 videos and 13 photos showing graphic, deeply disturbing scenes. A Chinese woman bound hand and foot with tape could be seen naked, terrified, and pleading with a white man to stop. Her voice, filled with despair and panic, was ignored as the man brutally assaulted her. In one of the videos, the camera accidentally fell to the ground, making the visuals unclear, but the audio continued to capture her screams and sobs. Painful echoes of absolute terror. This discovery unveiled a previously unseen layer of cruelty in the case. Once the woman overcame her shock, she immediately handed the USB to police. Upon review, investigators confirmed that the woman in the videos was Ling Ming Mei. The USB provided critical new evidence, undeniable proof of the extent of Barrett's depravity. The contents were compiled into an official case file and submitted to the court. Along with a request to reopen the investigation, authorities hoped not only to seek fuller justice for the victim, but also to reassess the sentence. Now understanding the true scope of Barrett's sadism, forensic experts verified that the man in the footage captured from multiple angles and devices was indeed Barrett. On December 9, 2020, based on this new evidence, the court reopened the case for a second trial. Prosecutors presented the additional videos and images, showing the unspeakable brutality inflicted on Ling Ming Mei. The courtroom and the public were stunned by the revelations. After thoroughly reviewing the new material, the court prepared to re-evaluate Barrett's sentence. Now fully aware of the monstrous extent of his crimes, Barrett was sentenced to an additional 22 years in prison for the sexual assault charges, which were added to his previous 46-year sentence for the murder of Ling Ming Mei. This brought his total prison term to 68 years, the maximum sentence allowed under Australia's legal system for a criminal of his kind. However, the outcome of the trial sparked widespread public outrage. Many felt that 68 years in prison was still far too lenient, given the brutality of Barrett's crimes. The fact that Australia had abolished the death penalty in 1967 reignited public debate. Some called for its reinstatement in cases of extraordinary cruelty, making Barrett's sentencing a hot-button issue not just in legal circles, but across the country. Case 5. This true story unfolded in Madison, Indiana, USA, on the morning of January 11th. Two brothers were headed out for a bird hunting trip when they stumbled upon a disturbing sight in an abandoned soybean field near Lemon Road. At first, they thought it was a burned mannequin, but as they approached, they made a horrifying discovery. It was the charred body of a young woman. At 10:55 a.m., the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office received the call. Detectives and the sheriff immediately responded to the scene. The victim, nearly naked except for a pair of underwear, had been burned from the waist down. Her legs were spread apart, her arms tied above her head, and her fists clenched tightly. Her chest was severely damaged, and her face was disfigured beyond recognition, her teeth clenched in a final expression of terror. Indiana State Police and forensic specialists soon arrived. The crime scene suggested a fire had been deliberately set to destroy key evidence. Investigators also noted signs of sexual violence. Her underwear had been disturbed, pointing to abuse either before or after her death. Initially, detectives suspected a gang-related killing, possibly linked to drugs, due to the brutality. But that theory was quickly dismissed after new evidence emerged. Found near the body was a melted plastic bottle with gasoline residue on the victim's wrist. A bracelet typically worn by students at Jefferson Middle School, engraved with the initials SGH. Later that night, around 9 p.m., a couple arrived at the sheriff's office with their daughter. The girl claimed she had witnessed a murder involving a female student. Shocked by the story, the sheriff immediately made the connection to a missing person report filed just hours earlier. 13-year-old Shonda Scherer. DNA samples were taken, and dental records confirmed the worst. The burned body was, indeed, Shonda's, the girl who had come forward with her parents, along with another, who arrived shortly after with her family, and a lawyer confessed to having witnessed the horrific crime but claimed they were too afraid to intervene. They identified the main perpetrators as two other girls. Shanda's devastated parents, Stephen Scherer and Jackie Vaught, rushed to the sheriff's office. When they saw the solemn look on the sheriff's face, they knew something was terribly wrong. Jackie broke down in disbelief and hysteria when she was told her daughter was dead. On the morning of January 12th, police arrested the main suspects, 17-year-old Melinda Loveless and 17-year-old Lori Tackett. Officers knocked on Loveless's mother's door early that morning. After a brief explanation, she led them upstairs to where the two girls were sleeping. Groggy and disoriented, Loveless and Tackett were handcuffed and taken into custody. The autopsy report was horrifying. Shonda had been tortured for nearly 10 hours before her body was set on fire. Her body was covered in bruises, cuts, and burns. The public was outraged and demanded swift justice. Due to the gravity of the crime, all four girls were charged as adults. In court, testimony from Tackett and Loveless detailed the crime in chilling detail. Shanda had become the target of Loveless's obsessive jealousy. The chain of events began when Shanda met Amanda Heverin at Hazelwood Middle School. The two girls became close friends, eventually exchanging romantic letters and forming a relationship. This enraged Melinda Loveless, Amanda's ex-girlfriend, who began threatening Shanda publicly. Concerned for their daughter's safety, Shanda's parents transferred her to a different school. But Amanda continued to stay in contact with Shanda through phone calls and letters. On the night of January 10, 1992, Loveless discovered Amanda had lied about ending her relationship with Shanda. Furious, she enlisted her friend, Lori Tackett, and invited two other girls, Hope Rippey and Toni Lawrence, to go out with them. These were the two girls who would later come forward to police. The group drove to Melinda's house and discussed a plan to scare Shanda. When they arrived at Shanda's home, Hope and Tony pretended to be Amanda's friends and invited Shanda to meet them later that night. Shanda agreed to sneak out at midnight. After attending a rock concert at a nearby park, the group returned to Shanda's house at 12:33 a.m. Tackett and Hope picked her up. Shanda, trusting them, got into the car. As they drove, Hope asked about her relationship with Amanda. Then Melinda suddenly emerged from the back seat with a knife, pressing it to Shanda's throat. Terrified, Shanda begged for her life. They drove her to a place known as the Witch's Castle, an abandoned structure deep in the woods. Tackett set fire to a shirt and warned Shanda that she'd end up just like it. Panicked by a passing car, the group fled the scene with Shanda still in tow. During the next drive, Loveless made Shanda remove her bra and swap it with Hope. When they got lost, they stopped at a gas station, hiding Shanda under a blanket in the car while asking for directions. The forest near Lori Tackett's home became the site of Shanda Scherer's unimaginable torture, while Melinda Loveless and Lori brutalized the helpless girl. Hope Rippey and Tony Lawrence, too frightened to intervene, stayed in the car. Eventually, Melinda suggested moving to a different location. When Hope and Tony refused, the pair were temporarily left behind. As dawn broke, Melinda and Lori returned to pick them up, and together the four girls devised a plan to dispose of Shanda's body. Despite multiple opportunities to help the dying girl, Hope and Tony chose silence and complicity. Lori opened the trunk, found a bottle of Windex, and sprayed it on Shanda's open wounds, mocking her agony. They then stopped at a nearby gas station and filled a 2-liter soda bottle with gasoline. From there, they drove to an abandoned field. Tony remained in the car while the others took Shanda, still alive, wrapped in a blanket, out of the vehicle. Under Lori's orders, Hope poured gasoline on Shanda's body, while Melinda set her on fire. They drove off, but Melinda feared the flames hadn't fully consumed Shanda. They returned, pouring the rest of the gasoline on her. Shanda is officially gone, Melinda declared with satisfaction. Lori also seemed pleased to have helped. Her friend, Hope and Tony remained silent, consumed by guilt, yet unwilling to act. After the murder, the group stopped at a roadside fast food restaurant, casually eating as though nothing had happened. Later, Melinda dropped Hope and Tony off at their homes. In the hours that followed, Melinda called Amanda Heverin, her ex-girlfriend, and the girl Shanda had also been romantically involved with, and another friend, Crystal Wathen, to tell them about the killing. At first, neither believed her. That changed when Melinda showed them the car trunk and Shanda's blood-soaked clothes. Amanda, horrified, demanded to be taken home and vowed not to speak of it again. Despite knowing what had happened to the girl she once loved, Amanda chose silence. News of the crime sparked widespread outrage. On March 15, 1992, prosecutor Guy Townsend charged Hope Rippey and Tony Lawrence with murder and aggravated battery with a weapon. However, the judge deemed them accomplices rather than direct participants. On April 9th, Melinda Loveless and Lori Tackett were indicted on the most serious charges for Shanda's murder. By April 22nd, Tony Lawrence accepted a plea deal in exchange for full testimony against the others. Though she avoided the death penalty, she still faced 6 to 20 years in prison. The decision triggered anger from the public and Shanda's family. On August 17th, Tony was found unconscious in jail after a suicide attempt. Following her recovery, Judge Todd ordered her transfer to a psychiatric facility in Jefferson County. On April 21st, Melinda and Lori pleaded guilty to multiple charges in exchange for avoiding the death penalty. In separate trials held in November, both admitted to their roles. Once close friends, Lori attempted to distance herself from Melinda, blaming her entirely and stating her intention to appeal. She even expressed hopes of pursuing a career in child psychology. On February 14, 1993, the media gathered outside the Jefferson County Courthouse as Melinda stood trial as the ringleader. Shanda's mother, Jackie Vaught, delivered an emotional testimony, showing pictures and home videos of her daughter. "It's all over. Our lives have been shattered," Jackie sobbed. "I want my daughter home this Christmas. I'll have presents waiting for her under the tree." Melinda Loveless was sentenced to 60 years in prison, the maximum for someone her age. She wept uncontrollably upon hearing the verdict. Judge Ted Todd had just one parting remark: "You still have the chance to live and do whatever you want after prison." But Shanda never will. Lori Tackett received the same sentence, but showed no emotion. Just 2 days after sentencing, Shanda's parents filed an appeal and agreed to a television deal to raise awareness and rally support. Tony Lawrence's trial began on January 19, 1993. She was cooperative, and several teachers and friends testified on her behalf. Speaking directly to Shanda's family, Tony broke down in tears. "I am deeply sorry for what I've done. I know you'll never forgive me. I will never find peace for the rest of my life." Jackie Vaught, still grieving, replied through tears, "I've attended 3 trials for these monsters. The real victim is my daughter, no one else." Tony was sentenced to 20 years in prison and collapsed in tears. Hope Rippey's trial began on June 1, 1993. She admitted to pouring gasoline on Shanda, but claimed she was following orders from Loveless and Tackett. The psychologist who testified on her behalf was not persuasive. Hope was sentenced to 50 years in prison. Tony began her sentence in 1994. In 1998, she applied for clemency and was denied. She applied again in 2000, and this time, her request was granted. She was released in December of that year, after serving nearly 9 years. In 2004, the Indiana Supreme Court reduced Hope Rippey's sentence from 50 to 35 years. Judge Jenny Minier cited Hope's remorse and potential for rehabilitation. She enrolled in a distance learning program at Ball State University while incarcerated and was eligible for early release. The news devastated Shanda's mother, Jackie, who was outraged that her daughter's killers were slowly being set free. The pain proved too much for Shanda's father, Stephen Scherer. He passed away in 2005 at just 52 years old. Jackie said he was consumed by grief and turned to alcohol. "He died in sorrow," she said. In April 2006, Hope Rippey was released after serving 14 years. She was 31. In 2007, Melinda and Lori's legal teams began preparing sentence reduction requests, but Jackie Vaught fought back. By late December, a petition with nearly 7,000 signatures was submitted to block their release. The efforts ultimately failed. 2 decades after her daughter's death, Jackie remained trapped in grief. In 2011, she appeared on the Dr. Phil show, where she described the horrors Shanda endured. She and her eldest daughter faced Hope Rippey for the first time. Looking her in the eyes, Jackie said, "You were inhumane that night." Hope, eyes welling up, responded quietly. She said she often apologized during her time in prison but couldn't fully explain her actions. Jackie replied, "Until you have a child and your child is murdered the way you did to Meinl, never understand a mother's pain." As of 2012, Melinda Loveless had spent over 7,000 days in prison. Few knew she had become a trainer for service dogs through the Indiana Canine Assistance Network. She even helped raise and train a therapy dog named Odell, used in court to comfort abused children. But one dog in particular, Angel, would form an unexpected emotional bridge between Melinda and the memory of her victim. 125 miles away. Jackie Vaught still lived with the agony of losing her daughter. "I have always said," she began, "look into Melinda's eyes, there's nothing there." Jackie once said, describing a girl who once seemed completely hollow inside. Jackie had long refused to have any contact with those responsible for her daughter's horrific murder. "All I ever said was that I just wanted them to serve their sentences," she once told the court. But unexpectedly, a program inside the prison that paired inmates with dogs for rehabilitation began to change everything. A burn survivor named Charlie Patrick who had once experienced pain like Shanda, convinced Jackie to watch a video of Melinda in prison. The transformation was shocking. Melinda, once the ringleader in her daughter's death, now appeared deeply changed. "She's learned how to nurture something, love it, and then let it go," Charlie said, referencing Melinda's bond with a dog named Odell in March 2011. Jackie witnessed something she never expected, genuine compassion in Melinda. She admitted that the ICANN dog program had given Melinda something, meaningful unconditional love and the capacity to return it. Moved by this change, Jackie agreed to a remarkable gesture. She allowed Melinda to train a puppy in Shanda's honor. The puppy, named Angel, had been touched, held, and named by Jackie herself. When Melinda first saw Angel running toward her, she couldn't believe it. "I said, 'Oh, this is unbelievable,'" she recalled tearfully. Jackie faced backlash for this decision, but she stood firm. "It was my choice. If you don't let good things come from bad, then nothing gets better. I know what my daughter would want. She would want this," she said. Melinda, deeply moved by Jackie's forgiveness, responded with gratitude. "She did a good thing. I want to thank her, and maybe just saying thank you isn't enough." Years later, on January 11, 2018, exactly 26 years after Shanda's death, Tackett was released from prison after serving her full sentence. Before her release, Laurie appeared on Dr. Phil in 2011, stating, "If I could go back to that night, I would have done everything in my power to stop it. I didn't know Shanda, I just thought I was helping my friend scare someone. It was peer pressure. Things got out of control way too fast." Melinda Loveless was released from prison on September 5, 2019, after serving 26 years. Since her release, she has remained out of the public eye, never speaking of the past again. The case that once shocked a nation, the abduction, torture, and murder of a schoolgirl by 4 teenage girls, had finally reached its legal end. Case 6. The murder in Beijing's underground garage on April 12. In the heart of Beijing, a decomposing body of a young woman was discovered in the underground parking garage of the bustling Oriental Plaza on Wangfujing Street. She was wrapped in a quilt, her shirt still on, but her pants pulled to her knees, abandoned inside a photon car. The odor was overwhelming. Police quickly identified the victim as J.Y. Ying, a student from the Foreign Languages Department at Beijing University of Technology. A native of Beijing, Ying was known for her beauty, charm, and stylish appearance. As an only child from a well-off family, she had the means to pursue a fashionable lifestyle and dreamed of dating a wealthy, Beijing-born man. Investigators determined the killer was someone Ying knew well, someone close to her. While following up leads, the police received a call from a student named Xiaoyong, who revealed his suspicions about his friend, Wu Zhang, possibly being involved in the murder and hiding the body in a car. Xiaoyong, also a student at the same university, knew both the victim and the suspect. Xiao was allowed to call Wu Zhang's home. The call was answered by Wu Zhang's grandmother. When Zhao requested the phone number of Wu's father, claiming it was urgent, the elderly woman became uneasy. Wu hadn't been home in days. Alarmed, she told her son about the call when he returned home. Shortly afterward, the police arrived at their residence. Reluctantly, they informed the grandmother that Wu Zhang had been accused of killing his girlfriend. At first, she refused to believe it until officers confirmed Wu had confessed the crime to his best friend. That evening, Wu Zhang was arrested at school while trying to retrieve his belongings. Once in custody, the soft-spoken student confessed, in full. Many who heard his story struggled to reconcile the crime with the young man they knew. Wu Zhang had always been seen as a model student, smart, outgoing, and well-mannered. Raised primarily by his grandmother after his parents' divorce when he was 2, he grew up in Beijing's Shunyi district. His father, a logistics officer in a government agency, and his grandmother took care of him lovingly. In 2003, Wu Jiang entered the Foreign Languages Department of Beijing University of Technology, excelling in academics and rising to become the head of propaganda in the student union. His father even rewarded his performance by buying him a futon car, worth over 100,000 yuan, a rare gift for a student at the time. This made him stand out. Many students admired him, assuming he came from a privileged background. Despite not being particularly handsome, Wu was considered an ideal boyfriend. He first met Ying during a school activity. She approached him, calling him by name, introducing herself as a fellow student from the English department. Their interactions were minimal at first, just polite exchanges and occasional text messages. It wasn't until the second semester of 2004, during a long-distance running competition organized by the university, that their connection deepened. Seated near each other during a post-run meal, they finally exchanged numbers and began to communicate more frequently. But no one could have predicted how this seemingly simple relationship would spiral into tragedy. During his first and second years at university, Wu Zhang was a standout student. Not only did he consistently rank at the top of his class, but he also received numerous awards and scholarships, and was even approved to join the Communist Party of China. Similarly, Ji Wang was lively, ambitious, and academically successful. As one of the top students in the English department, she had also received scholarships and worked as a reporter for the university newspaper. The two began to grow closer in June 2005. At the time, Wu Zhang often drove a futon car gifted to him by his father. Despite having a car, he remained humble and generous, always offering classmates rides, especially attractive friends like Ji Wang, whether it was going out to eat, watching movies, shopping, or simply hanging out. Wu became her unofficial chauffeur. On July 19, 2005, he drove her to Tianjin for a trip. While stopping near a tourist spot to buy a map, they returned to find the car window smashed and Ji Wang's handbag stolen, along with cash and personal items. The bag contained important documents, leaving her visibly distressed. Wu calmly comforted her and quickly contacted the police. Miraculously, the thief was caught, and her bag was recovered. Overwhelmed with relief, Ji hugged Wu and cried. That emotional moment marked the official start of their romantic relationship. After returning to Beijing, their relationship grew more intimate. During the summer break, they spent much of their time together, occasionally staying in hotels. At night, Ji would often go out to bars and clubs with a mixed group of friends. Wu Jiang disapproved and eventually asked her to stop hanging out with other guys. Ji didn't take it well and snapped, "Why are you interfering with my life? I'm happy the way things are." Wu felt it was natural to be protective as her boyfriend, but the disagreement led to a brief breakup. However, Ji soon texted him to apologize, and they reconciled. Determined to make things work, Wu promised to treat her even better. By October 2005, they introduced each other to their families. Wu Zheng's father warmly welcomed Ji, while her parents were initially hesitant about her dating during school. But upon learning about Wu's character and leadership, they approved. With both families' blessings, the couple felt lucky though. That luck would be short-lived. Ji strongly believed that men should pay for everything in a relationship. Since Wu was now her boyfriend, she expected him to cover all their expenses. Wu's father gave him a monthly allowance of 600 yuan. Before he had the car, Wu only spent around 400 yuan per month, allowing him to save over 2,000 yuan in 2 years. But after dating Ji, and with the added expenses of maintaining a car, his savings vanished quickly. Within just 1 month of dating, Wu had spent the entire 2,000 yuan he had saved. Ji, who was financially better off and accustomed to spending lavishly, assumed Wu's father was wealthy due to his government job. Her spending only increased. When Wu ran out of money, he secretly borrowed 1,000 yuan from his grandmother, but even that disappeared in days. Desperate to maintain his image, he borrowed from friends, eventually accruing over 6,000 yuan in debt. Still, This was modest compared to Ji's spending habits. Then came a serious blow. In October 2005, Ji Wang discovered she was pregnant. After lengthy discussions, they decided on an abortion, but Wu was broke and drowning in debt. As a last resort, he secretly sold his Futong car for 60,000 yuan at a used car lot. When Ji found out he no longer had a car, she refused to meet him, saying she had no interest in dating a poor man. To win her back, Wu used the money to rent a car and buy her expensive clothes. When his father learned what happened, he stepped in and helped redeem the car. Ji, seeing the car back, resumed the relationship. However, Wu's finances were still tight, and he could no longer indulge her like before. Ji complained he was stingy and declared, "A girl only wants a wealthy husband. If you can't meet my basic needs, we shouldn't be dating." But Wu was deeply in love and unwilling to let go. Desperate to win her over, he began spending excessively on lottery tickets, hoping for a big win. But luck was never on his side. Their fights over money intensified, and in some heated arguments, Wu even grabbed Ji by the neck, stopping only when she screamed for help. Trying to prove his worth, Wu told her about a suburban house his father owned, which would supposedly be given to him after marriage. Ji's eyes lit up. She immediately suggested they move in, as it was close to school. She even pressured him to buy furniture and appliances for the house. But in early 2006, Wu's father announced plans to remarry and his new wife was pregnant. The house once promised to Wu would now be the family home for his father's new child. Wu supported his father's decision, happy to see him find love again after decades of being a single parent. But Ji was furious. She cried bitterly, insisting the house should not go to his stepmother. "Why are you so useless? How can I marry a man like you?" She berated him. Though Wu didn't care much about the house, her words hurt. They made him feel that his father's new love would leave him forgotten. Under pressure, he went home and argued with his father, demanding the house. The house was rented until April 2006, and Wu's father planned to move in once the lease ended. When Ji heard this, she urged Wu to move in before that. "Let's claim it before your father does. He won't be able to kick us out," she said. Wu was now caught between loyalty to his father and the expectations of his girlfriend. The house became a recurring source of conflict. On April 8, 2006, Ji heard that IKEA was relocating and insisted Wu take her shopping for discounted furniture. He did, but when they returned home, she felt the purchases were still inadequate and wanted to go back, but the store had closed. That night, they returned to campus. Wu parked near the School of Economics and Management, and they sat in the car. Ji kept pressing him about moving into the house and furnishing it. Wu, increasingly uneasy, tried to change the topic, but she pushed harder. "Why are you so fixated on that house?" Wu asked, frustrated. "Sooner or later, it will belong to my father and stepmother. I just spent over 2,000 yuan last week on clothes." Angrily, Ji replied, "If we don't move in now, your father will take it back. I'm looking out for you. That stepmother and her son will take it all." Her words struck a nerve. Wu, deeply hurt by what he perceived as an insult to his family, snapped, "Why are you so eager to take over that house?" Ji paused, caught off guard. Then, after a moment of silence, she suddenly softened and pretended to reconcile. Suggestively, she leaned in and proposed getting intimate in the car, as they were about to get intimate. She suddenly said, "After this, let's go see the house." Wu Jiang felt a sudden rush of blood to his head. Her constant obsession with the house ignited a surge of anger in him. In that instant, he was overcome with despair, convinced that all his love had meant nothing. A wave of disgust and hatred swelled inside him, blinded by rage. Wu Jiang wrapped his hands around his girlfriend, she wiping his neck, and began to strangle her. She didn't have time to react. Within minutes, her face turned purple. and her body fell limp. Panic took over. He quickly dressed her, covered her with a newly bought quilt from the trunk, and began driving along the Beijing-Sunyang Expressway. The two had originally planned to visit Bedtime, so he headed in that direction. But later that night, after refueling, he got lost and decided to turn back. By early morning on April 9th, he had driven aimlessly before finally leaving the car in the Oriental Plaza garage on Wang Fujing Street. For the next 3 days, Wu Zhang wandered the streets like a soulless shell. He contemplated ending his own life to follow his girlfriend into death, but couldn't bring himself to do it. He still worried about his father and grandmother. Eventually, a friend named Xiao called. Upon hearing Wu Zheng's shaky, unstable voice, Xiao brought him back to the dormitory. Once there, Wu Zheng leaned in and whispered something chilling. What would happen if someone killed their girlfriend? Before Xiao could respond, Wu Zheng confessed that he had strangled Wiping and left her body in his car. Then, without another word, he turned and walked out. Xiao was left stunned. At first he wasn't sure whether to believe him, but after failing to find any trace of Wiping, he called the police. To his shock, authorities had already discovered the body. Knowing Wu Zhang was the killer, Xiao confessed everything he knew and begged the police to give his friend a chance to surrender. But Wu Zhang had disappeared. His attempt to turn himself in failed, and police finally arrested him on the evening of April 13th, inside the victim's room. Investigators discovered a diary that shed light on their relationship. In an entry dated April 1st, 2006, Wiping wrote, "Why am I so unlucky to have met such a poor and terrible man? I was deceived by him." Another entry revealed her materialistic attitude. "He always lies and brags about how good his family is, but in reality, his situation isn't even as good as mine. I despise men like him. I feel disgusted." In court, Wu Zhang admitted to everything and expressed regret to both families. "I felt like she wasn't with me for love. It was just a transaction," he said, explaining his motive. The court sentenced him to a suspended death sentence with a 2-year reprieve, a sentence that is often commuted to life imprisonment if no further crimes are committed within that period. Public reaction was divided. Some felt pity for Wu Zhang, a once promising student who threw away his future in a moment of emotional collapse. Others criticized Wiping's materialistic behavior, claiming that her relentless fixation on property and status had contributed to her tragic end. Case 7. The murder of a British millionaire and his Thai wife in a quiet northern province of Thailand. A brutal double homicide shocked the entire community. The victims, British millionaire Alan Hogg and his Thai wife Nad Sedan, were found buried beside a duck pen on their 32-acre estate. Strangely, nothing appeared stolen except for a newly purchased pickup truck. The investigation began on September 19th, when the couple failed to attend a meeting in Chiang Rai. Their friends were concerned. Alan was known for his punctuality and would never miss an appointment without notice. When repeated calls went unanswered, one friend volunteered to check their villa in Phrae Province. Arriving on September 23rd, the friend was met with an eerie silence. Inside the home, Alan's phone was still charging. Clothes and luggage were untouched, and their pickup truck was missing. Bloodstains in the dressing room deepened the fear. The friend immediately contacted the police. Officers arrived and launched a wide search of the vast property, which included a 3-story home, a pool, and areas used for raising ducks and fish. During the sweep, one officer spotted a freshly dug patch of soil near a duck pond alone disturbance in an otherwise pristine orchard. Sniffer dogs were brought in, and they barked furiously at the site. An excavator was called. After nearly 2 hours of digging, police uncovered the bodies of Alan Hogg and Nad Sudan. They had been buried 2 meters deep near the pond. Chaos erupted at the scene. Friends and family who had gathered watched in horror as their worst fears were confirmed. The bodies were taken for forensic examination. Results revealed Alan had been shot twice, while Nod had been bludgeoned to death with a wrench. Both had likely died on September 18th, just a day before their planned trip to Chiang Rai. Investigators believed the killer was someone close to them, someone who had access to the home and property. It would have been difficult for a stranger to bury the bodies undetected on such familiar ground. Soon, a neighbor came forward with a crucial tip. CCTV footage was reviewed, revealing two unidentified individuals breaking into the farm. One was seen driving away in the couple's missing pickup truck. This led to a shocking revelation. The prime suspect was someone well-known and well-liked in the local community, man perceived as kind, devout, and frequently seen at temples. When his identity was made public, it stunned residents. The motive behind the murders, however, was still unclear. What could possibly drive someone so close to the family to carry out such a horrific act? The murderer likely decided to bury the bodies right next to the house. Chilling decision that would only come to light later. Friends and relatives described Alan Hogg as a kind and generous man, someone always willing to lend money during hard times. His wife Nod said Anne was equally respected, a gentle soul who had devoted much of her life to caring for her disabled younger brother. Despite being married to a wealthy foreigner, Nod remained humble and never acted superior. Locals confirmed that the couple had no known enemies or disputes within the community. But things began to unravel when police reviewed security footage from inside and outside the couple's property. The breakthrough came from surveillance footage showing Alan's recently purchased white Ford Ranger pickup truck being driven away by none other than Nod's older brother, Warret Saket, a man commonly known as Saket. Police immediately launched a manhunt for Saket, but he had already vanished from the Fry province. His sudden disappearance only intensified suspicions, although many locals were skeptical. Saket was widely regarded as kind-hearted, often helping neighbors and volunteering at the local temple. He had worked for Alan and Nod for more than 20 years, and the idea that he could murder his own sister and her husband seemed unthinkable. Still, some of Nod's relatives supported the theory that Saket had a motive. They claimed the relationship between Saket and the couple had been deteriorating for years. After returning to Thailand, Alan and Nod ran a restaurant and laundry business before transitioning into poultry farming, raising ducks and geese on a large farm. Alan, being European, had high expectations and often expressed dissatisfaction with Saket's work ethic. Saket, now in his 60s, worked at a slower pace and struggled to meet Alan's standards. Tensions grew, and envy festered. Saket lived in an aging wooden house, while his sister resided in a modern 3-story home. On September 15th, Nod confided in her youngest brother about their growing frustration with Saket. She said he was neglecting his duties and had become increasingly confrontational whenever they offered feedback. Eventually, the couple decided that Saket would need to leave the farm. This revelation further bolstered police suspicion that Saket had both motive and opportunity. Still, investigators questioned whether Saket could have carried out such a brutal double murder alone, especially given his age. The crime scene offered clues. Bloodstains were discovered in the garage and on a sink, and a wrench had been inexplicably cleaned and polished, suggesting it was used as a weapon. Forensic analysis confirmed the wrench had indeed been used to kill Nod. Another key piece of evidence came from security footage dated September 18th. It showed a man arriving at the farm and being greeted by Saket. After that moment, the cameras recorded no further footage of Alan and Nod. Investigators began to suspect that the man seen on camera, along with Saket, had been involved in the killings. The search for the stolen pickup truck eventually led police to a local man who had bought the vehicle for 200,000 baht. That buyer later resold it for 430,000 baht to a man from Laos. When the man from Laos learned of the murders and realized the truck he now owned was tied to a crime, he voluntarily handed it over to authorities. Soon after recovering the truck, police arrested Sakut, but to their frustration, he denied all allegations and claimed no involvement in the murders. Lacking direct evidence, and with only CCTV footage placing him near the scene, police had no choice but to release him on bail. With the case at a standstill, investigators resorted to monitoring Sakut's movements. At the same time, they continued combing through the crime scene for any overlooked clues. Then, in an unexpected twist, a man named Suma Yupan, 50, walked into the police station with critical information. Suma confessed that before the murders, Sakut had approached him and asked for help killing Alan, initially willing to assist. Suma changed his mind after learning Sakut also intended to murder his own sister. While he refused to take part directly, Suma admitted to accepting 25,000 baht from Sakut and introducing him to two strong men who could carry out the deed, Pia Kamsi, 63, and Kapan Kamlin, 24. With this bombshell testimony, police arrested Suma and quickly moved to apprehend the two men he named. All three were successfully taken into custody. Eventually, Sakut confessed, admitting he had orchestrated the double homicide. He had paid Pia and Kapan 50,000 baht to carry out the killings. Police Chief Pat Peruda ordered a crime scene reenactment. According to Pia's confession, on the evening of September 18th, he and Kapan were led on to the property by Sakut. Pia went to the backyard and found Alan feeding the ducks. He shot Alan twice, killing him instantly. Meanwhile, Kapan attacked Nod in the kitchen. He covered her mouth, dragged her into the garage, and pinned her to the floor. There, Sakut used a wrench to bludgeon his sister to death. The three men then used a pickaxe, shovels, and a small excavator to dig a 2-meter deep grave near the duck pen, where they buried the couple. After disposing of the bodies, Sakut drove away in the Ford Ranger, later selling it to fund the hit. During further questioning, Sakut revealed that tensions with Alan had been escalating for years. Nod had allowed him to build a small wooden house on their property and appointed him head gardener, trusting him to care for the orchard, chickens, and cows. But Alan and Sakut frequently argued over how the farm should be run. When Sakut eventually asked for financial compensation for over a decade of work, Alan flatly refused. Nod sided with her husband, deepening Sakut's resentment. Faced with eviction, with no job prospects due to his age, and nowhere to go, Sakut devised a plan to murder the couple and fund the killing by selling their new vehicle. In a country where foreigners often register properties under Thai relatives due to legal restrictions, Alan had registered many of his assets under Nod's family's names. This made Sakut feel even more entitled, resentful, angry, and ultimately murderous. Even after Alan and Nad were murdered, some of their assets remained under the suspect's name. In fact, the couple's only daughter had even considered asking her uncle to help manage the family farm if her parents decided to relocate to the UK. Unfortunately, that trust would be misplaced. Sakut destroyed his own future in a moment of rage. Following his arrest, Sakut showed no remorse or regret for orchestrating the brutal murders. The revelation that he had hired hitmen to kill his own sister and brother-in-law sent shockwaves throughout the residents of Phrae province. Nad's uncle, Sanger Sukin, 78, confirmed that he had seen her at his store on the morning of September 18th. She was cheerful and gave no indication of distress. He said he had never heard Nad speak ill of her brother. If there had been any tension between them, she had kept it carefully hidden. Speaking about Werit Wretched, Sakut's real name Sengar described him as a kind and decent man. He was stunned to learn that his nephew had paid others to kill his own family over what appeared to be a minor dispute. Prazi Sudan, 61, another of Nad's uncles who lived nearby, echoed the same sentiment. He described Werit as cunt and said no one in the family or community could have ever suspected he was capable of such a horrifying act nearly a year after the murders. On June 3, 2019, The Frey Provincial Court officially began the trial for the murders of British millionaire Alan Hogg and his wife Nad, whereat Rachel was identified as the mastermind behind the killings, accused of hiring assassins due to ongoing family conflicts and a desire to seize the couple's assets, whereat Rachel, Pia Kamsi, and Kapan Kamlin were all convicted and sentenced to death on multiple charges. Another accomplice, Summon, was sentenced to 25 years in prison, his sentence reduced from 50 years due to his cooperation with authorities. The court described the crime as one that severely tarnished Thailand's international image. P. Chen, the family's lawyer, later stated that Alan's relatives in the UK were satisfied with the verdict. However, due to the cruelty and traumatic nature of the case, they preferred not to revisit this dark chapter in their lives. Case 8. This next case unfolded in Sweden, but its brutality made headlines around the world. The victim was a young woman who was 7 months pregnant, and the crime was so horrific that it sparked national debates about immigration, cultural tensions, and the integration of refugees into Swedish society. You be the judge. Let us know what you think in the comments. On April 29, 2023, at around 1 p.m., Melissa Elmborg arrived at her daughter Saga Eller's apartment to pick up a few items. The family was eagerly awaiting the arrival of Saga's baby boy, due in June. 20-year-old Saga was 31 weeks pregnant. She and her partner, Mohammed Hamid Ibrahim, whom they called Amin, had been together since the fall of 2021. Saga was excited to become a mother and often shared her pregnancy journey online. Her close-knit family fully supported her. She had taken prenatal classes and gathered essential baby supplies. Melissa, her mother, had been living with her on and off during the pregnancy. She'd given the couple a bit of privacy by staying away for 2 nights, April 27th and 28th. When Melissa arrived at the apartment that day, she was on the phone with her other daughter, Julia. She rang the bell, joking that Amin might be running around naked, but no one answered. Annoyed, she knocked and called out. When there was still no response, she used her key only to find the door already unlocked. This startled her, since Saga was very cautious and always locked the door, even for a quick trip downstairs. Inside, Melissa heard water running in the kitchen. She turned it off, and then saw a horrific scene. Saga was lying face up on the bedroom floor, her long hair covering her bloodied face. A marble tabletop had been placed on her body, and a lamp cord was wrapped around her neck. There were no signs of life. Melissa screamed into the phone and tried to lift the table, but it was too late. Saga's body was cold and stiff. Emergency services were called immediately, but both Saga and her unborn son were pronounced dead at the scene. Investigators quickly cordoned off the apartment. Saga was found lying between the bed and a TV stand. She was dressed in a pink-ribbed set pants, cardigan, and top, her face and hair matted with blood, particularly around her nose, mouth, eye, and forehead. Her tongue protruded from her mouth, and blood had trickled down her cheek. DNA was collected from under her nails and clothing, and impressions from the marble tabletop were found on her neck, trousers, and the carpet. Near her body, a lamp lay on the floor. The cord was loosely wound around her neck. Despite its position, the lamp itself showed no damage. The apartment showed signs of disarray: drawers pulled open, clothes scattered, and food left in a frying pan on the stove. Jewelry boxes were strewn across the bathroom floor. However, there were no signs of forced entry on any doors or windows. Shoe prints were taken as evidence, and it appeared Saga had been attacked while lying alone in bed. The coroner concluded that Saga died from a combination of strangulation and suffocation with the marble slab. Her struggle lasted 5 to 10 minutes, and her estimated time of death was between 1 a.m. and 3 a.m. on April 29th. Police began their investigation by interviewing Saga's family to understand her last known movements. Melissa recounted that the day before, April 28th, Saga had joined her and some friends for dinner at Mocha Deli. Everyone seemed to be in good spirits, but Saga was noticeably anxious. She kept checking her phone, waiting for a message from Amin. Saga had confided in her mother that Amin planned to tell his parents about the pregnancy that night. Understandably, she was worried about how they would react. Despite being in a long-term relationship, Amin had never told his conservative Muslim family refugees from Somalia about Saga or the baby. Saga's family, who were Swedish Christians, were aware of the cultural and religious divide. Amin had expressed fears that his family would disown him for having a child out of wedlock with a non-Muslim woman. There were also rumors that Amin had been seeing other women while in a relationship with Saga when she found out she was pregnant. He allegedly encouraged her to have an abortion to avoid fallout from his family. But Saga was determined. She told him she would raise the baby with or without him. Her family had been supportive from the start. Her grandmother had only encouraged Saga to think carefully about her future, her finances, and whether Amin would truly stand by her. She had also voiced concern about cultural differences and how they might affect the relationship. Over time, Amin had eventually come to accept Saga's pregnancy and even agreed to move in with her into a larger apartment on May 2nd, 2023, with him covering the rent. But despite being in a relationship with Saga for nearly 2 years, her mother Melissa recalled that she had only met Amin 3 times. This was especially surprising given that Saga was 7 months pregnant with his child at the time of her death. Melissa also remembered overhearing a disturbing phone conversation between Saga and Amin. Saga had confronted him after a woman named Diana claimed that Amin had asked her to kick Saga's stomach in hopes of inducing a miscarriage. Diana also told Saga she had been sleeping with Amin, although Amin denied it and managed to calm Saga down. Melissa remained deeply unsettled. So, when Melissa learned of her daughter's murder, her first instinct was to urge the police to question Amin. Investigators began establishing a timeline. On April 27th, Amin called in sick from work. He spent that day, the afternoon and evening at Saga's apartment. She had given him an ultimatum: tell his family about their relationship, her pregnancy, and the upcoming move, or lose her. He promised to break the news that evening when his mother got home at 10 p.m. Then returned to update Saga. Saga also called in sick on April 28th. She was nervous the entire day, anxiously awaiting Amin's visit. She messaged him repeatedly, and her friends and mother noticed her growing anxiety. But police soon discovered that at 11:13 and 11:15 p.m. on April 28th, Amin had typed out, but never sent messages telling Saga that he could not go through with telling his parents, and that they wouldn't be moving in together because he couldn't risk losing his family. This indicated that he never intended to follow through, and that he likely lied to Saga too, by time. Interestingly, Amin's mother had actually returned home at 3 p.m., not 10 p.m., as he had told Saga. Investigators questioned, had he spoken to his mother already, or was it all a ruse to string Saga along? Police brought Amin in for questioning. When told that a murder had occurred at Kung's Garden, 36B, Saga's address Amin remained eerily calm. He even joked with officers and pretended not to recognize the address. When told the victim was a woman named Saga, he acted surprised and immediately denied responsibility, claiming he hadn't been there since April 27th, contradicting himself. His suspicious behavior and inconsistent statements led to his arrest. Months later, Amin stood trial for the murder of his pregnant girlfriend. The prosecution presented compelling evidence. Amin's DNA was found on the stairwell near Saga's apartment door on April 29th at 7:20 p.m. This was significant. A tracking dog named Amina, trained to detect scent trails up to 24 hours old, had traced his path to the apartment, strongly suggesting he was there on the 28th, not just the 27th. As he claimed, the defense attempted to challenge the dog's reliability outdoors, but Inspector Hannah Higstrom clarified that scent detection is just as effective outdoors. Prosecutor Elizabeth Anderson stated that Amin had killed Saga by strangling and suffocating her, likely using a heavy 66-pound marble tabletop. According to forensic analysis, Amin entered the apartment with a spare key while Saga was asleep. A depression in the pillow suggested she had been lying down. He likely first used his hands or an object to attack her, then dragged the marble tabletop onto her throat, pinning her down. He used his weight to press the slab against her neck, crushing her trachea and blood flow, and it was estimated she struggled for 5 to 10 minutes before dying. Impressions on her body supported this theory. To cover his tracks, Amin staged a fake robbery, pulling out drawers and scattering jewelry. In court, Amin told a very different story. He claimed the gang had murdered Saga over a missing stash of drugs and money. He said he had received a bag containing illegal items and, when confronted by the gang, directed them to Saga's apartment. But this theory quickly fell apart. There was no evidence of such property, no forced entry, and no convincing signs of a robbery. Prosecutors argued that if a gang had been involved, they would have thoroughly ransacked the apartment, which they didn't. Only someone who knew exactly where to look, like Amin, could have done what was done. His friends Samir and Abdi testified under oath that Amin had no gang ties, casting further doubt on his story. His DNA was also found under Saga's fingernails and on her clothing, front and back. Amin claimed this came from consensual sex on April 27th, but Saga's mother stated her daughter showered daily, especially while pregnant. If Amin hadn't been there on the 28th, his DNA under her fingernails would likely have been washed away. Another major red flag was Amin's behavior after the murder. The morning after Saga was killed, he deleted her from Snapchat and erased all their text messages and calls, a clear attempt to cover his tracks before police even approached him. Phone records were also revealing. On April 28th at 8 p.m., Saga's phone connected to a tower near her home and stayed there. She remained active on her phone until 12:53 a.m. on April 29th, when all activity ceased, suggesting that's when she was killed. During that time, she had been texting Amin, trying to get updates. Her final message, shortly after midnight, simply read, "Baby, talk to me." By then, it's believed Amin had already shut off his phone and was on his way to her apartment. Amin's own phone records contradicted his alibi. He said he had been sitting in a car with his friend Amir, who was on a long call, but between las 12:22 am and 1:57 am. Amin's phone was used sparingly, and when it was pinged, it was traced to an area near Saga's apartment, not far away as he claimed. At 12:28 a.m., he missed a call from Samir, who had tried to reach him at Saga's request. This call pinged near her home. Given all this, his changing stories, deleted messages, suspicious behavior, the physical evidence, and motive to avoid telling his family and becoming a father, prosecutors argued that no one else had both motive and opportunity. There was no forced entry, no signs of struggle, and Amin had a key. It was almost certainly someone Saga knew and trusted, and that someone was Amin. The timeline of events revealed a critical window of opportunity between 12:28 a.m. and 3:30 a.m., the exact period unaccounted for in Amin's alibi. It was during this gap that the murder could have taken place. In a further twist, both Amin and Amir's phones were mysteriously powered off at precisely to 16 a.m., despite Amin's phone still holding a 40% charge. This detail suggested that one person may have been in possession of both devices. The act of shutting off the phone was also out of character when compared to his typical usage patterns in the days prior. Moreover, during initial police questioning, Amin prematurely declared that he had an alibi for the night of the 8th only, doing so before he was even asked. It was as though he had rehearsed the statement in advance, anticipating the direction the questioning would take. Although no clear, direct evidence linked Amin to the crime, The mounting circumstantial evidence painted a compelling picture when viewed as a whole. Still, some remained hopeful that the absence of physical proof might introduce reasonable doubt. One puzzling piece of evidence remained: a footprint discovered at Saga's apartment that didn't match Amin's. However, this anomaly wasn't enough to definitively exclude him from being present that night. Throughout the investigation, Amin denied any involvement. "Yes, I have been in denial for 9 months now," he stated in one of his final interrogations. He claimed he loved Saga and their unborn child. Investigators also looked into Amin's claim that his family would disown him if they discovered he had fathered a child outside of marriage. But this allegation remained unsubstantiated. In fact, there was no clear indication that his family even knew about Saga's pregnancy. Amin had reportedly told them the couple planned to move in together the following weeks, suggesting that he may have invented the threat of familial dishonor as a cover, using his religion and Somali heritage as a shield. Whether his family would have welcomed Saga and the baby is something we'll never truly know. According to Swedish court chairman Lars Gunnar Lund, this was defined as an honor-related crime. Prosecutors described Amin as living within an honorable context of his own definition, in which he felt he was not allowed to be in a relationship with a white woman. On June 5, 2024, 22-year-old Mohammed Amin Ibrahim was sentenced to life in prison for the murder of Saga. The court's decision was unanimous, yet Amin continued to maintain his innocence, stating in court, "I love Saga and our child. I have never had any thoughts, ideas, or plans to kill Saga. Violence is not in my nature." Amin and his defense lawyer argued that the true perpetrator must be someone else, and vowed to appeal the verdict. Case 9. The tragic story of Wu Shan from Zhejiang Province, China. Wu Shan was born in 1987 to a poor farming family in a remote mountain village. As a young child, she was known for her sweet nature, striking features, and sparkling black eyes. She was bright, diligent, and consistently ranked among the top students in her class. But at just 8 years old, her life began to unravel. It started subtly blurry vision, itchy and burning eyes, and difficulty reading the blackboard at school. She mentioned her symptoms to her mother, but her concerns were dismissed as mere childish complaints. Not wanting to burden her already overworked parents, Wu kept quiet and tried to manage on her own. As time passed, her vision deteriorated rapidly. By the time she was in 3rd grade, she could no longer read the board at all. Her grades, once exceptional, plummeted. When the teacher contacted her parents, the family took her to the local district hospital, but the facility was severely under-equipped, offering only a basic examination and prescribing simple eye drops that had no effect. Soon, her condition worsened in ways no one could have predicted. Her face became alarmingly swollen, and she often complained of a crawling sensation beneath her skin. Her nose began to swell and deform, pushing her eyes further apart. Eventually, her entire face became so swollen and misshapen that it was difficult for her to sleep at night. As her face changed dramatically, the ridicule began. Schoolchildren taunted her. Villagers whispered behind closed doors. Some started referring to her cruelly as the horse-faced girl. Others claimed she was cursed, or that her family had angered the gods, adding to their distress. Rumors began circulating that her illness stemmed from the family's frugal diet. In that poor mountainous region, it wasn't uncommon for families to cook and eat animals that had died from illness. Wu's family had followed this practice, and now they feared contaminated food might be the cause of her condition. They altered their diet and turned to traditional Chinese medicine, applying folk remedy pastes that only worsened her condition. Forced to drink bitter herbal concoctions, Wu endured excruciating pain with no improvement. Still desperate, her grandparents hired a shaman to perform an exorcism, believing she might be under a curse. The ceremony cost a fortune but achieved nothing. Wu's swelling only worsened. Her breathing became labored. Her nose nearly vanished beneath layers of swollen tissue, and her eyes bulged unnaturally. Ashamed of her appearance and determined not to frighten others, Wu locked herself inside her house. Her parents removed all the mirrors to ease her distress, but she could still feel the changes in her face by touch. Once a confident and bright student, Wu Shan withdrew from the world entirely, spending her days alone as life continued around her, while other girls her age enjoyed dressing up and going to school. Wu remained trapped both by her illness and the social isolation it brought. For years, her home became her entire world, and her story faded into the background of rural superstition and poverty. For over a decade, Cheyenne lived in isolation, always covering her head and face with a cloth whenever she stepped outside, desperate to hide her unusual appearance. Her family had already faced immense hardship, spending everything they had on treatments that never yielded results. But then, tragedy struck again. Cheyenne's mother, overwhelmed by her daughter's prolonged suffering, worked tirelessly on the farm and took on extra jobs, all in hopes of saving enough money to take Cheyenne to a major city for treatment. The constant physical strain eventually took its toll. She suffered a brain hemorrhage, and, though she was rushed to the hospital in time to save her life, she fell into a vegetative state. Now, the weight of the entire family's survival fell on Cheyenne's father, Mr. Wuan. He had to shoulder not only the mounting medical bills for his wife, but also the ongoing costs of Cheyenne's care. Since he was away working most of the time, Cheyenne assumed the responsibility of caring for her mother herself. Over the years, Cheyenne's condition worsened. She lost her vision entirely, but rather than give in to despair, she taught herself how to live in darkness. She learned to identify objects by touch, cook, clean, and manage household chores. Sometimes, her meals were too salty, but her father always ate them gratefully, knowing the effort it took. Despite being blind, she took full responsibility for her mother's care to lighten her father's burden, but her resilience couldn't prevent accidents. One day, while preparing a meal, she tripped over a chair and fell. The impact was so severe that the large tumor on her face ruptured. Thankfully, it was raining that day, so Mr. Wuan was home. Seeing his daughter bleeding heavily, he rushed her to the provincial hospital. At the hospital, the doctors were stunned by her severely deformed face. After stabilizing her and running several tests, they suspected she had optic nerve tumors. It was 2009, and Cheyenne was 22 years old. The diagnosis brought a wave of relief to her father after years of uncertainty and rumors in the village that her condition was a divine curse. He finally had an answer, yet the news was far from hopeful. The fall had caused Cheyenne to lose over 1,000 milliliters of blood, nearly a quarter of her body's total volume, putting her in a critically dangerous condition. Surgery was necessary and urgent, but the family had no money left. They were simple farmers, and with the added costs from the mother's hospitalization, they had already been borrowing from relatives. As Mr. Wuan struggled to find a solution, a doctor at the hospital suggested contacting journalists to share Cheyenne's story, hoping that public attention could help raise funds. Although hesitant at first, fearing the shame and humiliation his daughter might feel from being filmed, he had no choice but to tell Cheyenne the truth. To his surprise, Cheyenne agreed. She said she was willing to go public, to be interviewed and filmed if it meant a chance at treatment. Her courage moved her father deeply. With her blessing, the media began reporting on her case, calling her the horse-faced girl. The story spread rapidly throughout Zhejiang province and beyond. While some people were simply curious about her appearance, many more were touched by the family's suffering and rallied to help. Within a few weeks, donations poured in. Over $1,000 was raised for Cheyenne's surgery. However, when they returned to the hospital with renewed hope, the doctor delivered devastating news. The odds of a successful recovery were only 0.1%. It was like a splash of ice water to the heart. Still, the doctor recommended seeking help from Sun Yat-sen University-affiliated hospital in Guangzhou. where more advanced medical equipment and highly skilled surgeons were available. Soon, Cheyenne's story was picked up by national media, including Liaoning Satellite TV and the Guangzhou Daily. Donations surged again this time, totaling more than $25,000. With that support, Mr. Wuan and Cheyenne embarked on their most important journey yet. In early March 2010, they boarded a train to Guangzhou, the longest trip Cheyenne had taken in 14 years. At the outpatient building of Sun Yat-sen University-affiliated hospital, a petite girl wrapped in a pink scarf caught the attention of staff and patients alike. When asked, she explained that she covered her face because she believed she was too ugly and didn't want to frighten others. Touched by her vulnerability, the doctors gently encouraged her to remove the scarf. When Cheyenne finally unveiled her face, Dr. Li Guan, head of maxillofacial surgery, was stunned. In all his years of practice, he had never seen anything like it. A massive tumor had taken over her entire face, pushing her eyes so far apart that her nose and mouth were barely visible. Her face had lost all normal human proportions, and now resembled that of a horse. A CT scan revealed the extent of the damage. A large skull-like mass had distorted the entire structure of her face. Her eyes were pushed aside, rendering her blind. Her nose was crushed, impairing her ability to breathe and smell. Her mouth had shifted downward, leaving her barely able to eat or speak. But the diagnosis from this hospital was different. Cheyenne did not suffer from optic nerve tumors. Instead, she had a rare condition called fibrous dysplasia, caused by a genetic mutation on chromosome 20. This mutation caused fibrous tissue to replace normal bone, especially in the facial area. Over time, the buildup of abnormal fibrous bone had grotesquely disfigured her face. After 13 years of living with the disease, it had reached a critical stage. Doctors informed her that the only path forward was surgery, highly risky, with a real possibility of death. But if left untreated, she would continue to live in agony, both physically and emotionally. After much thought, Cheyenne and her father decided to proceed. She said she didn't care about the success rate, she just wanted a chance at a normal life. She was tired of hiding behind a scarf and being known only as the horse-faced girl. Her bravery and the unwavering love of her father deeply moved the entire medical team. Although the surgery would be incredibly complex, the medical team was determined to minimize the risks. They devised a detailed plan. First, they would make an incision down the center of Cheyenne's face to remove the massive swelling. Then, they would reconstruct her upper jaw and forehead, using titanium plates while repositioning her chin to its original placement. Next, they would clean her nasal cavity, reposition her eyes in their sockets, and secure the eyeballs with titanium mesh. Finally, they would remove excess skin from the center of her face and suture it in accordance with her newly reconstructed facial contours. This ambitious surgical plan, developed by a multidisciplinary team, relied heavily on titanium plates and mesh to rebuild her facial structure. The night before the operation, both Cheyenne and her father were anxious. She wanted to call her mother to talk before surgery, but her father, Mr. Wulong, refused. He hadn't told her the truth that her mother had passed away a week before the operation. The family had agreed to keep this secret, fearing that the shock would be too much for Cheyenne to bear before undergoing such a critical procedure. As expected, the operation was intense and fraught with challenges. From the very first incision, blood poured out rapidly, so much that even the most seasoned doctors were startled. The extreme blood loss caused Cheyenne's blood pressure and heart rate to plummet. Yet, thanks to the medical team's experience, calmness, quick decision-making, and meticulous work, Cheyenne miraculously survived several life-threatening moments. After more than 9 hours, the surgery was declared a major success. Over 90% of the tumor, estimated to weigh around 2 kilograms, was removed. Her face was reduced to nearly half its previous size. Her eyes were returned to their correct position, Her nasal cavity allowed her to breathe more freely, and she could, finally, eat through her mouth again. However, one heartbreaking consequence remained. Cheyenne was permanently blind. The tumor had been compressing her optic nerves for too long, and the damage was irreversible. After she recovered from the first surgery, Mr. Wulong finally told his daughter about her mother's passing. To everyone's surprise, the 22-year-old didn't cry. She accepted the news calmly, perhaps because she had grown more resilient and mature after enduring a life and death struggle. Over the next 6 months, Cheyenne underwent 2 additional surgeries to further reconstruct her face and improve her appearance. She was proud no longer needing to cover her head with a scarf every time she stepped outside. Upon returning to her hometown, she was warmly welcomed by her community. People came to visit and offer encouragement. Charitable organizations and government agencies frequently stopped by with gifts. Cheyenne even found employment, doing handicraft work, earning a modest income. In 2012, she returned to the hospital for a follow-up exam, where the doctors gifted her a scarf. The entire medical team cheered her on, expressing hope that she would soon find someone to love and marry. Although Cheyenne longed for companionship, she hesitated, believing that her blindness would make it unlikely for someone to want to be with her. But in November 2017, her relatives introduced her to a man named Alino. He was 11 years older and had suffered from polio, which left him with difficulty walking. Perhaps because both had endured so much hardship, they connected deeply and found many things in common. Though she couldn't see his face, Cheyenne could feel Alino's warmth and kindness. To her, his age didn't matter, as long as he treated her with love and care. In October 2018, she returned to the hospital for another follow-up exam, this time accompanied by Alino. She brought many gifts to express her gratitude to the medical staff at Sun Yat-sen University-affiliated hospital, the team that had given her a new lease on life. The doctors informed her that as she aged, the tumor would grow much more slowly and would eventually stop developing. While there was no risk of the tumor metastasizing, there remained a chance of recurrence. To monitor her condition, she would need to undergo checkups 3 to 5 times a year. Today, Cheyenne and Alino are happily married and have a child together. The inspiring journey of the horse-faced girl, who once hid behind a scarf for 13 years every time she stepped outside, has reached a hopeful new chapter. It's unclear exactly how Richard Davis and his roommate first met, or why Davis ended up moving in with him. What is known is that around that time, Davis had gone through a divorce, and his ex-wife later gave birth to a baby girl. Davis never made any effort to be part of his daughter's life. He provided no support or involvement as she grew up. Detective Mickey Link eventually tracked down Davis's daughter, who was in her 50s by then. After being informed about Nancy's case, she agreed to assist investigators by providing a DNA sample. On June 13, 2022, what would have been Nancy's birthday, her sister, Linda, received a phone call from Detective Link that would change everything. A DNA sample provided by Davis's daughter had come back from the lab. It matched the biological evidence collected at the crime scene all those years ago. Detective Link returned to the original case file. At first, she had little more than a name, no middle initial or birth date to go on. But after discovering a decades-old record confirming that Richard Davis had once lived in the same apartment complex where Nancy had been murdered, everything began to align. When the DNA from Davis's daughter was compared with blood samples collected the night of Nancy's murder, the results were irrefutable. It was a match. At long last, the truth was uncovered, thanks to Detective Link's tireless determination. The Sacramento County Sheriff's Office was able to confirm publicly that 27-year-old Richard Davis had been responsible for Nancy Benneck's murder. Contrary to initial suspicions, Davis hadn't fled the scene and vanished. He had remained nearby, living close to the very place where he had committed the brutal crime for many years. While the truth had finally come to light, the outcome was bittersweet. Both Nancy's fiancé, Ferris Salam, and her killer, Richard Davis, had long since passed away. Ferris in 2004 and Davis in 1997. That meant no justice could be served in a court of law. Still, Nancy's sister Linda and her husband Tom expressed deep relief in finally learning what had happened, though Davis ultimately escaped legal consequences, having died from complications related to alcoholism. His identification, at least, brought the family some closure. There would be no prolonged and painful trial. The truth was finally known. Detectives believe Davis entered Nancy's apartment through a slightly ajar, sliding glass door. He had taped his fingers to avoid leaving, fingerprints a strong indication that the murder had been premeditated. While his motive remains unclear, investigators suspect that Davis may have harbored romantic feelings for Nancy and possibly killed her out of jealousy or rage after learning of her engagement. At the time, Davis was questioned by detectives, along with his roommate, but no one thought to inspect his arms for knife wounds and oversight that might have otherwise exposed him. Had they checked, it's likely Davis would have spent the rest of his life in prison. Despite his known temper and reputation for volatility, Davis had no significant criminal record, only a minor DUI offense, which meant he was never entered into the CODIS DNA database. This further delayed justice for decades. In a statement read by Sheriff's spokesperson Lieutenant Rodney Grassman, Linda expressed her family's profound gratitude for Detective Link's unwavering commitment to solving the case. She admitted that she had nearly lost hope it would ever be resolved. In a later written reflection, Linda and Tom shared how often they had imagined how much Nancy would have loved their ranch, with its open skies and animals roaming freely. They mourned the life she never got to share with their children and grandchildren, but they were also comforted by the belief that Nancy's soul was finally at peace.